Alright guys, welcome to this next session of our course, and you're watching one of the tutorial sessions for building secure, scalable, fault tolerant and low latency APIs. And from the last video I mentioned that we'll be building out kind of a full scale authorization and authentication auth service, right? So basically and I went ahead and refactored my code last time and created the auth service and the user service, right? Just for cleaner code. And I think I mentioned last time about what this thing is called. This is domain-based structure of folder, if I did not mention, or I made a mistake mentioning last time. But that said, today we are going to dive on how we're going to approach this problem. And I was thinking that, there is no real clear idea of what we are building, and I was just teaching these particular principles. And today I want to actually just tailor this to a basic employee management system, not too complicated, but just basic, but with some security that should allow you to understand what this topic in depth. And essentially what we're going to do is so I'm going to come up here, and we are going to have like employees, which in this case is our user, and it's going to be of different type, right? You have like HR, so they're going to have departments, sorry. So we're going to have like employees, which in this case is our user class, right? And then this employee is going to have like a department, right? And then so we have the obvious basic thing: name, email, password, right? Then roles. Okay, but we're also going to update this to have policies. Okay, and in the sense that you can attribute rules to users or employees, but you can also directly attach policies to employees, and this is for mostly just to bypass those rules that for example, you want to give a temporal, let me just say, in AWS you call it like a user, and then roles are more temporal, right? But in our case, we're going to use direct attachment of policies as much more of a temporal kind of thing, while roles are for longer authentication. So for example, if a user has like a rule, and then for some reason you want to give it some extra permission just for a very short period of time, but you don't want to create an entirely new rule for it, right? You can directly just attach the policy to it, and it will be the user will be able to perform that action that requires that policy, provided that every other authorization mechanism checks out. And later you can just remove the policies. For things like I said, clouds, for much larger cloud systems, you have users as particular so users are created and they're attached policies directly like this, and those are more permanent policies, and then roles are for temporal policies. You understand. In this case we are kind of flipping the script just for it to make sense in this particular scenario. And again, we are doing RBAC, right? PBAC. So okay, and I think ABAC, attribute-based access control. So all of this we have to implement within our system. So first of all, we are going to go to our user model, and we are going to define so we define our role as a single string, but the user can have multiple roles, right? So we can define it as a list. Okay. I think that What's happening? Am I spelling this wrong? Yeah. So and also we are having a default here, which is not supposed to be, is not correct. And we are not going to give it a default, but right away we can actually create an annotation called like we can create an annotation called set rule, right? Which should act as a default. No. Anyway, we are going to do the role in the controller class. I mean the service class. So what we want to do here, so we have role, we want to add, so what am I doing? Yeah, so kind of sorry. We want to add policies, so we have to have private private list of enums, so it will be like policy, so policy, so system policy, this is called system policy, policies, and we're going to create this under enums. So we're going to create a package enum, and we are going to create the policy, create enum policy. So it's not the model, so user service dot enum, and we're going to create that there. And then so right here we're going to define our system policies, and these kind of policies, as I explained, are much more for longer term use that govern the behavior of the system or what you can access within the system, right? So this kind of policies will include like read, write, and all that. And then we have business level policies which define different actions such as the degree of modification you can do, even if you have like rules, and the kind of things you can do, right? And those ones are more temporal and changes ever so frequently, but these ones are more permanent. So you want to keep these ones as enums, and you want to define as much as you can that your system are going to use. So we can just define, let's say, user. So user read, okay. But also, you can. And how do you kind of like do this policy? How do you name this policy? And my approach here, although I've not really investigated how you name policies in your, let me see. But the approach I always like to use is, let me move this a bit to the side and like Google. So let me just, what? Do you, let me say, choose how to define policy names in, I don't think like in Java, just in general, your system, right? So like Java. Because I'm thinking you look at the resource and then you add the action, and that's what I'm going with, right? So in this case, the user read will be able to read user information, okay, and user write, right? User write. So this is my approach, at least for the basic. The user delete, then user update, okay, and you could just name it user actions. So for resource, user related actions. Is it user related policy for, so policies for actions on the user, right? So user resource, right? And then you have another one. So this, so and this can also like admin level policies, right? And basically you can go admin read, admin write, and admin delete, admin update, right? What a game. So let's just leave this here, okay. And you can also have like, let's just say, because these ones you can also have like other user, so under the user, right, you can have other policies like read other user, or user read other, right? Basically, essentially I'm trying to, you know, make so this for reading other users as mockups, reading other users information without admin privileges. Is it one? Privileges. Huh. Let me look at the spelling again. Oh yeah, so it's double L. Privilege. Okay, one L. One I, one L. Alright, so it's another with another user. So you could, and actually I could do this in, I could like put like a comment there. Right? I could do right, and basically do something like that, so that when I call this, you know, I could hover over it, and you know, I see what's happening here, right? So and you could do that for updates too, right? So you could do all of these for so I could just delete all of that, okay, and then I could do users, or write orders, right, to create a user, right? And this is for cases where you're not admin and we might need that. For example, you could assign a manager. A manager is not necessarily an admin, but you have the right to create a new employee if it's found like in a new region or something like that. So user, order, read, others, no, I know what I want to do. Users, user delete or update. Right. Then we have the user delete others, and we can do the so it will be create another user without admin privileges, and this is like I think it's like the same thing. And I know this sounds like crazy stuff, but again, these comments are very important when you're working in an enterprise. They allow you to understand what a code is and what is useful. So be like system policy update user, and then you understand, okay, this is to create another user without admin privileges, and this gives you the permission to do that. So user delete, this is create another user without admin privileges, this update. So update another user's information, and then this is delete another user without admin privileges, and then these ones are just the basics that they understand. I kind of put something else down there. And admin reads, of course, you could also, and in the comments you could define, you could go ahead and define what each thing each of these does. So admin can maybe like create so it's kind of a one-line thing because I have them many. It's not one thing. Admin read, again it's read all, so this one can be like read all, read users, all users information without read all users information. And there could be more privileges, right? You could put admin read for reading user, right? And this is depending on your system. You could also put admin up. So if we had to maybe create a service like a file service here, you could add admin, right? Maybe admin, admin delete, right? Files, right? And what this does is it's able to delete with this privilege, an admin can delete maybe all the files of another user's files, right? Something like that. And that's just my approach for this, right? And my naming convention is so that it's easy. So users read orders, right? Users write orders, right? Users update orders, right? So what I'm saying that as a user, you can read orders, information, and this one is just user read, right? As a user, you can read your information, and it's just same thing. So this is same thing here. No. And again, don't be too triggered by the comments. I know clean code, you'll be like, but this is very well written. This is by word itself the user can understand. But not everybody has the knowledge too, especially when you're coding. You really just want to, call the system policy and then dot you get the enum, and you just want to like hover over it and see exactly what that enum does rather than going to the enum and trying to look and see. It's easier that way, and that helps for confirmation too. So create any user. Let's say create any user. You can create a new user, right? So basically, and the user right, I don't think we'll need that. But the user right will be like the user create, right? Because the right, it doesn't make sense. The user create, that's better. User right, user create orders, yes, and then so this allows us to create, and we could use this in terms of the sign up section that allows to create the particular user, but again that's going to require a certain policy, so we'll not use that actually. So I don't think that is accurate there. The user cannot create another user, but again, if you think that a user can create like a sub user, okay, maybe in your system a particular user can create like a sub user and then do something, then again that's a policy that you want to include. But in this our system is just like employee-based system. We just want to do something simple, and so create any user, and then this one, so admin write, so we admin create, admin delete. I think I'm just going to update that first. Update any user's information, and then this one will be like just delete user, right? Delete any user information. And you can do the same, yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know what? Let's just go ahead and do the same. To read your information. No. User reads only their information. Users read. Yeah. So users delete only their information, and we're just going to go update here just to make it consistent. In user updates, only their information. And with that, we have our basic system policy, right? And that's the system policy, right? And so here, no, that's something else. Now, our user model, we have the system policy in here, and it can take a different amount of policy. In our role, we are taking just a string, but we don't want to have, now our role changes, we don't want to have just string, we want to have more than a string, we want to have an actual role class. Okay, and where are we going to put this? So So it's going to be in a model, which is going to be an entity 2. And we're going to have a role because we are going to save it in the database. And first thing first, I'm going to annotate with the entity. Entity annotation. No, that's not what I did. Oh, okay, so it's entity. And I also want to be able to skip the getter and setter. So I'm just going to add the generics data, no as constructor and all as constructor. And I also just want to be able to build it this way. I'm using runtime for that. And it's complaining because there's no ID yet. So entity should have a primary key, and we are going to just private, I don't know, for rows. We're not going to have too many rows, so we'll just put private int, integer, right, and ID. And then we are going to have a list. So the name of the row, private, string name, and then we're going to have private. Yeah, you can have a description for a row. I'm going to have private list of system policies. I have policies. Okay, so import list have policies. And for this, we have to tell JPA that this is generated value, ID from Jakarta persistence, and we want to put generation type. Strategy, sorry. Generation type identity. And when creating, we want to make sure that this is not null, this is not empty itself, and this is also not empty, right? When creating this, I don't know if we no. Let's see color. So not unique should be true. So the name of the row should be, yeah, it should be true. So you cannot have two rows. Yeah, so I'm creating a row like a user role. Different people can inherit a user role. So the name should be unique. Nullable should be false. But essentially, we could just could add that not there. And it's like Jakarta is going to go in. Oh, this validation constraint, okay. And same thing here. Yes, and we also go, so description should, yeah, it should describe the role and it should not be unique, and also we should have the nullable false. No, unique should not be true. But we can have the size, we can have the size. Let me see what parameters are there. Setable false. Character, check column, relation, number. I don't know if I think size. Where's the size coming from? That's validation constraint. Okay, that's on strings within 150 characters. Yeah, no, well, it shouldn't be like. We also want to put it in terms of the database when we're creating this dynamically. I don't know if like size is here. Length, I think. Yeah, length is 50. There we go. So length of this should be 250. This should be like virtual characters. Again, you're not describing everything. You're not describing your life here, right? So you're just describing something short. For example, user role grants user permission to do the following. User stuff. So let's just put like 500 here to just make it a little bit more spacious. And this is database level implementation, and then this is Jakarta validation. So the size already eliminates that. You don't need that, because if the size is not, if it is not that, it's going to throw an exception. The column unique true. I don't know, the last time I tried this did not exactly work. Not sure why. But basically when I put nullable false, it basically was still nullable. So I'm not sure why that's happening. So that's why I'm leaving the, I don't know if not null alone is sufficient. It cannot be null but empty. So we have to check to make sure that it's not null, it's not empty. And we could just use the size. Size is going to make it exactly the same. Right, so we use the size, in this case 1 to 50. Right. Again, you're not typing your life there, so description is still the same thing. And we have system policies, and this is going to be a list of policies. I think this is enumerable, element collection, and then I think it's a list of stuff at enumerable, enumerated. Fetch element collection, since it's a list. And it's a list of enums. So fetch eager. Well, yeah, when we are fetching a rule, we want to fetch all the policies associated with that rule. Yeah, so it's correct. So we're going to remove the redundant, the unused imports. And of course, we already have our getters and setters and our no-argument constructor and everything else. So this is our role, and our role now is going to be taken here, and we're going to import role from that, and that's going to be role. So if you check it, we should have, okay, since it's in the same package, it's taking it directly from there. Okay. Okay. And I think it's fine to put it within the user class, the user service. Then we need to make some modifications to our auth service when assigning for policies. We also need to assign a role. I also need to make modification to our JWT. Our JWT will only take policies rather than roles, because policies are more lower level and roles contain policies, and the same policy can be found in the role and all that. But also we can actually just take both of them, the role and the policy, and if that's the case, so I'm just going to keep the role there, I'm going to keep the enumeration out too. And let's take a look at security in the auth, right? So in our JWT, which is in our property token parser, yeah, so the provider, this is where we do the implementation, and we are adding our claims, which is role.get roles or get user.get roles, right? I don't exactly know if, okay, so get roles, which is a list of roles, and then a list of rows and user ID. We also want to add a claim. We want to add policies. And why I'm leaving row there is because no, did I add policy? System policy. This personal auth user. So our auth user itself need to have. So this is actually a string of row. So it's list of row now, right on the string. So that's a set, and we're going to have it private. Set of permissions. Of course, we'll have actually just policies. Actually use permissions or system policy. Just security to the policy, and yeah, we're going to have implementation problem. And why I'm leaving row here is because sometimes you just want to check against the row, assuming that it contains certain policies, such as you create like a user row. A user row is going to have a basic policy, right? And your system already knows that. But again, I don't know. Right. If you want to go more fine-grained, I think at the end of the day, you could check. I'm thinking you could check. Yeah, I think you could check row for a broader access, and let me say like for a controller, right? Because normally your request comes to your controller. So sorry, it gets your tomcat, right? And then move to the filter, right? Then move to interceptors, right? Then move to your controller. Then if there are aspects there, right? Move there, intercept before it gets to the method. Then it goes to your DB, right? Then goes back. And sometimes, right, because right here, this aspect is where we are restricting, why we are creating all of these policies, because we want to do fine-grained authorization, and that's our own method and attribute level authorization, right? And this interceptor level actually works alongside the controller. Basically, what you will be doing here is, securing against much broader sections of your application, while this secure a much more fine-grained version of the very lowest level of your application, methods and attributes, right? And in this case, you want to check policies directly, right? And I'm thinking that, yeah, you could also do check policies, but here you mostly want to check about roles, right? So for example, in a sign up controller, let's say the user or the login authentication section, right? So user sign up and user login, right? Maybe you don't want to have like policies, you don't want to be checking against restricting against fine-grained policies, right? You want to most check up against very larger rules, and or for something like so let's just say if they are sending an endpoint to delete user, okay, and the endpoint is the admin section, you don't want to check against, if they have the admin delete policy, right? You want to forward check if by any means at all they even have a role of admin, okay? Because like I said, if you design it well, only admins will have admin roles, and every other user is going to have temporal, sorry, sorry, and I wanted to bring out the enum here, that's why I'm confused like that. So the enum. So every other user is going to have like temporal rules if they want to perform an action beyond their scope, right? Temporal policies if they want to perform an action beyond their scope. And that's what like most of this cloud they do, right? They have like default rules that they come with the system itself, and then you have much more customizable additions that you can extend a user's capabilities based on them, right? So a user is typically going to come, a user role is typically going to come with something like this, okay? And this is basically persisted at runtime, at persist time when the user is created. And then maybe this user gains like, let's say something happens, okay, and then the boss is say out and cannot perform the delete, but they really need that action to be done immediately. Rather than the boss to say, okay, take my account, open my account and perform this action, which is risky, you never want to do that to an employee. You want to be able in your system to assign temporal permissions that grant a user a specific authority to perform a specific action without it being permanent and without him having access to more than what he's supposed to have, right? Because if I give a user a read, right, an admin read, you can read every other user. But if I give a user read orders, right, you can customize the business rule that in order to read orders, you also need to introduce the other user's information. So allowing that user to only read just one user, but not more than just that one user. I hope that makes sense, right? And this is what we talk about where you look at fine-grained permission and fine-grained access control. Is being able to extend someone's capabilities without giving more authority than ever required, right? And that's why I want to include so in that case, so that's part of it. So that's the entire explanation why I want to keep rules, right, and not check with just policies, right? Because rules at the end are just going. I'm just checking. Okay, if you want to perform an admin action, do you even have the desired role to even begin to access the method, right? And that, so around here I'm checking for more of role-based access control. Do you even have the role to even begin to access the controller? If you don't, then I fail you immediately. That's a fail fast system. But if you do, then I ask, okay, show me your permissions, your policies for that particular admin. Let me check. Then on top of it, I'm also checking business rules and requirements. I hope all of this makes sense. If it doesn't, then just comment. I'll try my best to reiterate. But I think I have pointed out that already. And we're at user, auth user. So we have the policies there, the user role and the username. We have the long ID. And right here, get policies. And yes, there are some errors. So right here we're putting set copy of, which is not supposed to be set of copy of, because now user rows are a string. I mean rows are lists, right? And then what's happening here? What's the error? So user details. We also we need to. So we're trying to create. So we're trying. So we need to create this user details. So we need to open user details at auth, which is a detail. And again, we need to copy the same thing, auth user. And make sure what's happening here. Long string, username, private string username. Oh, so we're using privates. These are not supposed to be. I think. What's happening here? Oh, these are records. I think it's a record. So made a mistake. So it's kind of separated with a comma. Yeah. So this is a record. And the user detail, and then the auth user. So the ID. User ID. Yeah, so we just like keep the ID there. So what's happening? Constructor long string set. We also have JWT for permissions dot policies. There we go. Yeah, okay, so that works, yeah, at least for that section. This one still has some problems. I think this will be more of the, okay, what's happening here? We have 4 problems. Okay, I am mistaken. This is the API section, API key. I told you we are going to, so this is basic auth, but I want to focus on the JWT, new auth, and that's basically in the authenticator constructor. Yes, and this will be in the authenticator within the implementation. JWT authenticator and user ID. So the first thing we are doing is that, so the username, and so string request get head authorized. And what are we doing? JWT authenticate. Okay, so we are authenticating the request, we get the barrier token, we check if it's valid, and then we get the user as extract user token. So JWT user details, and we'll convert it back to auth user. It should have been extracted to a mapper for adaptability sake. It should have just been a simple method because we're doing this over and over and over and over. So it could be to user details and to auth user there. But for now, let's just keep that. And I think what's missing is the policy, right? And also we don't need the set copy of, because we're already passing a list or a set, and it's going to just be user, which is from the user detail.policies. And that's it for that one. And I think that there is another. Let's see, user details. Let's close user details. Auth user. So there's 3 of them now. So let's try that again. Yeah, so this is for API keys. So I'm just going to, since I'm not using that, I'm just going to comment that out, because map of auth user, we're not putting it well. Yeah. But in order to just satisfy this, we could put the set of right. So it could be like a user read. And that's all. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, so this row and this is provided string set of string system policy set of system policy dot user read. I just put that there. Yes, and then here it's going to be row, which is new row. We just want to create an empty row. Right, that's all. We just want to create an empty row there. And again, this is placeholder. This is not part of what we're doing. I'm just to avoid the errors at runtime, and I'm just going to move that there. Yeah, and that gets fixed simple. I think there's also one at basic auth. Yes, there's one at basic auth. So if we cancel, so that's JWT at basic auth, you will have again the same problem. We remove the set off and remove that. Then you want to comma, and then you have like user policy. No, not password. You gotta get policies. There we go. Get rules. Get rule. Setting an S. I don't understand. Required type provided. Oh, so it's a set. So provided. Oh, so I like set. Dot off. I think that is, which is going to be rows. Why do I even put a set there? Well, a set is going to have unique values, and that's why I put a set in the row. Oh, so yeah, actually we should do that. So for this put list here, I should just put set here, because this allows for only unique values when creating, so that should help work in there. And yeah, we should have that too. Yeah, the roles should be unique. Should not have like one person have like two roles, and that should solve this problem, because I think we're getting on the database here. Yeah, and JWT provider itself, I think uses set, and the auth user itself uses set. Related problem, and what is this? User service, new user, set of user rule, also. Yeah, so we would have come back to this, but for now let's just fix that. Since we're already working with set there, and then we're just going to get And we can have default policy, and we can have policy generator service. So in the service, this, I think this is the user service, right? We could just have default policy generators, which generates default policy based on the user, right? We could have like a particular kind of, so a kind of service here. We could have a package called default service. So default role generator service. Yeah. And what this will do is we are going to have an interface which again we want to make it extendable. We're going to use the strategy pattern, but the factory pattern, but use a strategy pattern to produce what the factory is going to do. So what I'm trying to do is have default service generator so default role generator, and it's going to be an interface, and what it's going to do is going to take two methods, which is going to be public, I'll just say boolean, change the public boolean supports. Again, we've seen this before. Does it support the service? Does it support role? Yes. And then we're going to have it's going to return a role and generate role, and this is going to pass import class. But we don't want to actually call the generate role because we already know the role here, right? That's all. And yeah, we have to save this row. Oh, okay. But we want to get this row from the database too. That's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah, I think because what I was thinking is create this thing that says default rules, right? And then every other rule we can create them later dynamically. And that allows us to like load the rules and these defaults, these are like admin, user, employees, those kind of stuff, those kind of like the already known rules, that basic rules that every particular user is going to have, right? And that's what I wanted to do, but let's see. Since all of these are already public, let's see. I don't know what to write here. I don't know if like the AI can help me. comments are even useful here. But and then we have like this one. Let me see. Yes, I'm still connected. I'm not getting any help from here. I hate this part for comments. They're a bit difficult for me to get right. Then if I say here is check if the generator supports this row or supports a particular row. And the row needed. I think my internet is finished. Because at this point, I'm not even getting help from AI. Comments are terrible. Like, I understand it, but it's just difficult for me to document it well. It's really, and I want to do like something much better. I don't know why Copilot is not even giving me any particular help here, or even IntelliJ's autocomplete. So row to be generated, row to generate, and then it's going to return true if this generator, if supports row type, and false otherwise. And this one generates the required row, and then this one is going to return row requested, else probably throw an exception, maybe throw exception, and then I'll like that through. I also think that this should throw an exception, but not this actually, because this is where it actually checks for the support, right? And this is what should throw the exception, right? Because and this doesn't throw the exception. Once it's checked that this is just generates it by default, and so we know what is going to generate, but this doesn't know. So if someone passes like a row that does not exist in the default generator, then it's going to throw an exception, which is let me see. We could even anyway, we'll just leave it exception now, and we could actually put like a to-do here. Define, because if I want to make anyone, let's just no such row exists exception. create it. And exception. Oh, okay, so let me see. Norms, no. Exception, yeah. Alright, so let's keep it there. And class exception. Extends exception. Oh, we have like is it public? Or social exception. No, like code is super. So super, I think it's super. No. Forward to create exception classes. Excuse my very bad manners. Yeah, super.message. So excuse me for call the constructor, and essentially we don't want to put a set of rules, we just want to put the message here. Right, yes. A super.message, there we go. Yeah, excuse me for that slip up, but yes, so we have that. So no such exception. There we go. And now what we'll do is we will implement this, so we can have like a user role, right? And this generator and again, I do not think this through. Our rules stay in the database. They are not created. So when we create each role, it has to be associated with an ID. Yeah, okay, so it's still valid. So we just have like role generator here. Role generator. We will not have like support. Right, so I think I have misunderstood how this was supposed to work, and yeah, so I think I'll get rid of all of this. What's this? User service, build, user role, set off for now. Oh. Yeah, so that's the problem. That's the problem here. So a pattern is string, and we need an actual row. Right, so I see what's. So excuse me about that. What we are supposed to do here is, because our rows are being saved to the database, right? And we load the rows from the database. So we have to get like a row loader, right, which is a service. So this should be I think we're also going to be loading policies too. Yeah, so we should actually just rename this to be loader. So, loader service. Basically calls the load function, and it can maintain the same thing, and rather than method, it's just going to load basically the same. No, that's not. I'm just trying to force in strategy pattern everywhere. So no, so just create like a simple class, right? So we're just going to create a simple class, which is okay. So that's under the service, and we're just going to create the. We're naming this to loaders, right? And this we're just going to delete, and we are going to have specific loader. Yeah, but every policy is going to have like a load. You can use like so anyway, we can make it an interface and use literal primitives, and then it's going to be public load throws exception. There we go. That public is not really useful there, and then that's going to be a comment and loads elements. Anyway, I don't know what I'm going to write there. Like I said, it is just loads. It doesn't load elements. Class. Class. Or just object is going to return list of. So I think it's going to be like a list. Is set. Should we put a set for rows? Is going to be a set of it. For policies, though, let's keep the list. There might be a situation where Java util return a list of objects class. Exception if something could actually then have like row loaders, and then that implements loader, but now with the generic class row, and then we are going to override it to the function. We're going to implement the method, and it's going to return a list of row. Yes. And what this is going to do is, so if you go over there, you have load elements of the given class, blah blah blah. And how we're going to return the list of row, we are going to call the row repository, and this is going to be an interface. So row repository. Remember, row is an entity, and we're just going to extend JPA repository row, which is not a string, it's an integer. I'm not even sure if that's correct. Okay, and we are going to find, so we're going to optional or no, actually we're just going to list of rows find by, what am I doing, find by name. Yeah, so that's present, and then we have the string name. Okay. Oh, so it's not actually a list that's going to also have loaders. It's going to load the row. Again, over engineering here by me. So when I got here, I realized that we are loading just a single row when we are finding by name. And there's a problem here. So if we find by name, it's just not a list of rows. So here is actually optional. Yes. So there's an over engineering here by me. And the loader, we're just going to so we're going to take the load. So in the load section, we are going to take a string. And we're going to take the row name, right? Or just by a string. And what this is going to do, yeah, is going to take a string. We have row name, and I am going to use this, put this as a service, and use require ask constructor so that I can use the final and pass the repository here, row repository as that, and then we are going to simply just return row repository dot find by name row name. That's dot get. Through, and actually I should just, so it's lambda expression, and just like a new, maybe we can new rule of file exception or no such rule. No such rule exists exception. I'm going to put no such. Yeah, that's true. Also, it's a list of roles. And the problem here is we can have like two we can have two functions. One to simply load a single. So yeah, we can have two of them. We can have so we can have two load and we can override it to just like a T. I don't know if by the return type itself it's okay. I think it's okay. No, it's not going to be okay. Yeah, so I have the identical thing. Yeah, so there was exception. So for all, you like load, is it like load all? Load all nice. And also, like I said, over engineering here, because I'm thinking that we can have policy, but I'm forcing things here. I'm forcing every, yeah, so it's not exactly the best approach because I'm quite literally forcing every loader to implement two. But in this repository, is there a case where we actually require to get all the rules? Because we can load a rule based on the user, but also based on the name, right? So and I'm forcing we're loading the rule based on the user. I want to get all the rules, and the list here is going to come in handy. However, if we, in this case, when we just want to get rule or get a single or load a single rule, right? We want to basically, get just one rule, and we're loading it based on a string. And the policies too, right? The policies. You can get a policy based on one, right? But we can also get a policy. No, actually, I don't think I used to get any policy, right? So what I would do is, for policy, we get them directly, or yeah, actually we get policy based on maybe a string, like an ID or something. Yeah. So the policy will be like based on an ID, or all policies. No, based on yeah, policy will be based on a string. But will you ever get a policy based on, that's business rules I'm talking about? Will you ever get a policy that will be based on like a user? I don't think so, right? So basically, most policies are tied to resources, the business policy, and yeah. So I think it's over engineering on my part here. and all of this is not really needed. I could simply just create this allow just the row loader, and basically just a single implementation there, and that will be all, and this will not be needed. So this is the repository. Where's the other one? So the loader will not be needed, so I could just delete that, yeah, so that we can use the row loader appropriately, and it just does a basic thing. It just loads the row, and it loads the row from the repository, right? And we can use it within the service, right? And load the row and pass it here. Okay. And so every user now has to have a particular self role, and the basic rule can be like get all row from by the name. And so here we could include another final, which will be private final row loader, right? Row loader, and then we are going to get the, so can get like a row, sorry, we're going to get a row, so like user row equal to row loader dot load, and then want to load the row based on the user. It's not the name of the row. Is there something that we are not looking at? So it throws an exception. Okay. So I think something here. So we should wrap this with a try and catch. Try. Okay. And I think all of these actually will go within a try and catch, because we're building, we'll register the entity that's basically the repository. Yeah. So it's also transactional. So let's say we register with the mapper, we convert to the entity, and then we save it, and then we can do, and I think it will end here. No, it's all of them. Right. Yeah, so that's what I want to catch right now. So we want to catch exception E or EX, and then we are going to but we also have already load, we throw an exception, so we just throw a basic exception. So in this case, I want to throw a no such. And right here, I'm not exactly sure if, yeah, let me try and catch. Because once we call this method, it cannot load the row. It's going to throw an exception. So it throws a no such rule exists exception. So row loader, row name, no such rule exists. no such row exists exception, and we get row loader dot load. So we load the user row. No, do we have to put it in a try and catch block again? Because when we catch this without handling the exception there, it's yeah, add it to method signature. There we go. So there was no such. Okay, so that was the main problem. And so right here we are just going to put user row. Yeah, and that takes away that particular error and unrelated problem. Oh, JWT token register. I think that's a controller. Yeah, we also need to add an exception to the method signature. So it throws no such rule exists. Methods. But do we actually really need to add this to the method signature? We don't, right? The real loader we could just commit it here. Okay. So we need that. It's interesting. Controller. And yeah, I also need like policy. Again. Yeah, so and one of the things is how do we then, so we need like an admin panel which is going to load, because we need to create all of the roles and the different policies, right? Yeah, there are different policies. And the policy is going to be just nothing, right? Just pass a new list. New set. Set. Because it's empty, right? It doesn't have any attached policies to it. And in this case, we're checking at row level. For our user.get policy, we want to override the get method for get policies, right? And the get method for get policies is going to be so it will be public set of policy or system policy. Right. And we're not returning just policies, right? We want to return a new set, right? So I think it's hash set, system policies, new hash set, and we are going to get for every row. So we're going to get row. So for row, right? This dot row, at least, yeah, I think we need that S here because it and that will cause a lot of problem. And I want to know at least that. Yeah. So we have so let's just fix those immediately. Auth user basic auth, and that's going to be S. Also think that API will also shout. So for users, API will also shout. There's a service. There are a few places. So let's where is it? And set of, yeah, so we don't need the set of here. I think that is okay. Although we'll come back to the user service, but I just want to deal with some of the errors right now. And we have the user loader, we have the auth, that's okay. Contains role. Okay. Yeah, but this is its role, and that is auth user, and that's the thing. We have any implementation problems? No, I don't think so. And we have, for now, and that problem is gone. So right here we can just put these dot rows, and that works well. So row, this dot row, and we need to also, I think it's we need to add policies. I'll add all this dot policy or result. So let's say complete policy. Because this dot add all. So I mean complete policies dot add all these dot policies. Yeah, this is sorry, this is what I have to do. And what we are going to do is simply just going to complete policies dot add or dot add policy. Yeah. And this is only going to take the ones that are not already present, and that's why we're using set. And then we are going to, at the end of the day, return complete policies as our construct as that, right? I think this overrides the I don't know if because I'm using Lombok, I'm afraid okay, so I'm afraid the get policies might interfere with the, but I think we'll find out. But this has get policies. But does not have the set policy. We can also have multiple other methods here, such as get a single policy. Again, this is just a method level. You can have like a get a single policy, but we are going to need, let's just keep that implementation from when we are going to need it. And the role of set policy. And that, so basically this gets the complete policy for this user. And again, where we system policy user user controller. Let's start deleting stuff. Let's start closing stuff. All right, so I think that's all for now. Although I think that there are errors in different places. We'll find out when we attempt to run the application soon enough. But user, we have our set of rules. Right, so the loader is okay. Have I completed that? So I was in the policy section and I may have just the user service. Right, so we have a system here that has this policy, and the question now is, I think, let's see if we can run this and this will run. Now I think that will crash really badly. Yes, yeah, there we go. UWT token parser provided list of strings, list of class, dot class. So set So what are we trying to do? Extract user details. So we are going to also get a set of policy or system policy, right? And we're going to policies going to be equal to claims, right? Get set of class, something like that. I think I hope it is in plural. But just for safety measures, I think we are going to, we're going to go to the provider, which provides us with ability to click. And so yes, policies, And so the parser itself, it's okay. And so we're just going to get policies like that. And that clears that up real quick. So we have ID, string of username, self roles, and self policies. Yes. And we have require role dot value. Incompatible type Java string cannot be converted into model. Author get has role require role. It is passed as a string. Alright, so anyway, I do understand what's happening. The has role, yeah, on what is it? I think it's auth user. Yeah, takes a role. Yeah, and then compares it in a row, right? But they also have like public, has policies, system policies. And it's not really going to, it's going to create a hash map, system policies, new hash map. And this is auth user, right? This is auth user. I really just want to, rather than having all of these computations here, the policy itself should contain all policy and the roles. Yeah, so in the provider, if we go to, so what I'm trying to do here is that I don't want to take this one and run this computation here again, because remember we did that here in the user section, okay, where I say return all, get all policies from that user, right? We don't want to do this. Yeah. So in the token provider, right, we did, so in the user, sorry, so I'm going to look at it. See, if you look at the token provider, right, when we are generating the token, we we do this users.get policy. So right now the get policies we have defined. So that's an auth user, right? And oh, and what happens here? Okay, that passes an auth user, and that's in generate token. And so in the user service itself, so this will be called in the generate token. This will be called in the user service. So let's go to the user service and look at maybe sign up, register, and this will be right. So it will be user dot, here will be user dot get policies, right? And we'll define this get policies really, okay? And basically this is our definition that states, so what we're doing in this user dot get policies is that we collected all the policies of every role and the policies directly attached to the user itself, and we put them in one place, and that's what we're returning, a unique list of all policies that the users can contain, whether directly attached or attributed to another role that the user that's attached to that user. And that helps us in I think here, or is it? No. That helps us here because we now, no, actually, where's the auth user? That helps us here because we don't have to now do the same thing here, right? Because we are sure that this policy for the auth user will always contain the complete policy, including that of the roles. And like I explained to you, why I'm leaving the roles here is that on their own we can check for a much more larger section when it comes to control. I think I explained it just back, just scroll back a little and you will see it. But essentially the rule allows us for a broader check higher up in the chain, and this one allows for a more fine-grained check, right? And that's what we're getting the exception. So we're just going to return, right? We're just going to return the policy. So return, right? Policy that contains policy, right? And that's all, right? And if we just do that, oh, now we all of it. Okay, and that's all. And we could comment that out too. I mean, we could add comments to it. Check if policy is present in the set poly. Check if the user has a particular policy. And you can do format policies, right? And do the field fast, has policies, and then pass it in self policies, and then you do for all, you do the contain, and if it doesn't contain, you simply just fill it, right? And that might come in handy when you want to just do a group check rather than, you know, checking individually in that particular function. So policy string policy we want to check for. Alright, returns true if present in the set or false otherwise. So in that case, we are checking for row and we need to pass the row. But in our has require row.value in this, we are basically taking, if you go to our user service, right, require row, we are basically passing a string, right? And what we can do is here in the require row, okay, the value here, we want to pass in an enum which is system policy, okay, and then the default. No, we want to pass in a row, sorry, not system policy. Row, require row, and it's not default. Okay, there's not default. It's an entity. So let's look at this. Let's look at the aspect again. No. So we have the require rule, we have the user service, and then there is the authorization aspect. This is passing a rule. I say this is not acceptable here. And if we do require role, we want to find the role by the user. So we are going to keep this the same, right? And right here, okay, so we might not even want to have a default here, okay? And what's going to happen is, so right here, before we pass this rule, we are going to load the rule. And basically it's by the name. So we're going to void check rule, and we are going to require as constructor. We're going to have private final row loader, right? Row loader. And just here we are going to get so just so get a context. We're going to get a row. So var O equals to no row loader dot load require row dot value. I think that takes in like a string, exception to methods. And then it doesn't just true, no such row exception. It also throws forbidden. So we can just put like it throws exception. Yeah. And then here we are going to now use the rule. But now the computation will be in terms of, I don't know, because the required rule implementation here is checking objects, but then no. Well, yeah, it's going to have ID the same and everything is going to be the same. So yeah, I think that will work because the object itself is going to be the same created every time there. Right. And so what I'm doing here is that since we are checking with rule, we've updated our rule is now an object, not just a string. That this aspect implementation that we had here was using a string, which is what we're passing. But the thing is that since we're passing in the user service, we're passing admin, although I really don't know. Okay, we are not checking for policies here, so we're checking for rule. And so the rule basically is not saved in it's not hard-coded in our system, it's saved in the database. And so we use a string, and this is why our loader is important, because we find the row, we load the row by the row name, and then it throws an exception if we cannot find that row. Okay, and that's why we use our loader. And so in the aspect, where is it? Oh, yeah, so here it is, authorization aspect. What we did is we loaded the row using the row loader, and now we have our role based on the required role demanded for that method. And then now we check if the user actually has that particular role, right? And this is going to check for and make sure that it does have it. If it doesn't, then it's going to throw another exception. And rather than having all the forbidden and every other exception, we just throw a basic exception here. So we're indicating that this throws an exception, but this is going to throw a forbidden exception. But we just indicate that it throws an exception, and we already implemented this particular forbidden exception. So thus far, let's see if we have a problem. So has rule again, this is same issue. So update path interceptor. Oh, so this was okay. So this was an implementation I did a few times, some time back, but I could just comment that out just to make sure that so everything's working well. All right. So we have a failure, and entity manager factory defined in class path resource blah, blah, blah. So basic collection. So it's a user. I think the error is coming from a user model. Let's go up and see. A basic collection row, which is not known as a basic type. Attribute is not annotated element element. Okay, one too many. So I need to add the elements in the role section in the user. So if you go to the model, you have the user. Now our role is now set, okay, and so we have to have element collection here. Element collection, right? And our policy is also element collection fetch either. When we fetch a user, do we fetch the role too? That's interesting. When we fetch a user, do we fetch the role? Yeah. And it's again this enumeration, enumerated enum type. So why is it enums here? So we need to use the enumerated enum type. So set rule. Okay, so we can have one to many here. So we have the relationship here. One. So one to many. So when we fetch fetch type, fetch eager, cascade, not all, cascade dot touch. I think it's persist. Wait, hold on, let me see. And these things they don't always have. They don't have. Let me see. One too many. What's the? Yeah, cascade type. This for deleting. We're asking if you delete the user, should we delete the role? I say no because roles are independent. Should we just like leave it? If we leave it, does it have cascade type? No. I think all is the default. Do we detach? Move. I think persist is the best. Let's verify. Slow internet. So we just can't trust. I think I've used this before. It's actually persist, and I hate this. When I say persist, I think it means to remain, right? It continues. It continues, right? All is not recommended. That means you delete all. You detach. I think detach is also like you want when you delete. You don't want to delete. There's the stuff there. Refresh. You don't want to do that. Remove. You don't want to do that. Persist is, I think, detach. Often removal true. No. Hold on. Do we? I just want to check that. So in Spring, I want to say in data GPA Spring, which cascade type or option should I use to make sure when I delete doesn't remove the associate elements. Just persist, just persist. Okay, so save the child when the parent is safe. I don't want to take the charge, I just want to. So fetch type is eager. So mapped by, so it's like the, no, hold on. No, actually I don't want to have mapped by there. Because I'm saying that this is mapped to the row table by a particular value, which is not what I want to do. Right. This is just a list. So cascade type, detach format true. So cascade type persist. Formula false, which is set by default. Yeah, so I think it's supposed to persist. I was right. It's been a while. 120. So I'll call. Yeah, so let's try that again. Because on the other end, I don't really want to have any relationship with. Yeah, there we go. So what is done is it created a table row policy. So you created a table row, you created a table row policy, created a table user policies. Then Hibernate create a table users row, right? And then all the table row drop index, blah blah blah. Order table rule, add constraint, unique. Oh, so that works now. Add on name. Okay. Alter the table rule, drop index that, and alter the table rule, add constraint, unique on rule ID. So alter the table rule, user policy, add constraint, reference user ID. So I think that works, right? Our application is running well-ish. So if I were to open Workbench, yeah, I'm kind of on Microsoft Workbench. I should see. Yeah, so these are the tables that are created, and under row policies and user policies. So these are row, so user ID and row. Yeah. Alright, so that's good. So right now we've done some updates and upgrades, right? Yeah, and we've created a basic structure of how our application will look like and what kind of how our authentication system will look like. So we have our system policies which are defined here, right? And we have our, I don't know, I wanted to be able to pass like rule, but again it's mostly policy. And right here we are going to do, for aspect, we're also going to do like require policy, right? And I want to do that just before I end this particular session. I know it's been 2 hours, but the require policy, because now we're doing require rule, right? But the require rule is going to be used mostly around the constructor, the controller, right? And some broader sections of our application. However, in the methods and more fine-grained area, I want to use require policy or require policies, right? Depending on the policies passed. So I'm just going to create a single require policy, right? Just something, because we have a require rule, I'm going to duplicate that, so I'm going to put this, sorry. So in user here, we have annotation, a require rule, right? I'm going to add require policy, which is going to be annotation, require policy. And it can be more than one, okay? And yeah, it can be more than one. We can pass it in terms of an array, a set of, a group of. So let's try that. And we are going to take it at runtime, attention at runtime, right? We're also going to target, and it's going to be fields, element type, we want to do methods and field. Let me see. No, we just want to do it at methods, right? And we want to take in So system policy, we want taking system policy, we want taking an array of depth, right? And it's going to be values, right? And this can take multiple different different list of system policies, and essentially they are going to be passed in an array such as this. And we have now our aspect, which is this, right, authorization aspect. And we can have this before. And it was an exception, right? And essentially, what we are going to do here is, again, we're going to get the auth results, or to get the context for the user, right? And that contains the roles and the policies. And we are going to create, no, this time around we don't need the role, because again the policies have been passed as system policies. So what we are going to do is basically run this check, which we are going to type if, right? So sorry, if auth, right, is not null, or so if auth is equals to null, or auth dot um, dot get auth. So the get auth basically authenticated user. I think I should give a better name there, because yeah, this is the get auth additional. I should have given a better name, because I was confused when I was looking at the. So I wanted to get the user. I was confused, but anyway, dot has policy, right? And then I'm going to, again, you see where that comes in, right? So you can check for have a single policy, and you can check for if it has multiple different policies. And actually, I just want to check now for this particular one. So what I can do is has policies, right? And it's not just going to be as simple as returning policy. Right, so it's going to take a set. Right, so it's going to take a list, or at least a set of policy, of system policy. Right, and essentially it's going to go for each policy. So it's going to go for policies. So we're going to policies. So user is going to have system, sorry, policies, and for each system, so for each policy, so what we want to do in system policies, because we're checking this one against this one, right? So we have to check each individual policy passed in this set against everything found here. So for each of these, right, the first thing we want to do is, if policy does not contain, we want to fail fast, right? If it does not contain, we want to return false, and that's all. Okay. And at the end of the day, we just return true. Okay. System policies, string, so set of policies you want to check for. Yes. And so this checks for the policy, right? So if it does not contain even one of them, we want to fail as quickly as possible. However, if it contains, then we just return. If it contains all, then we return true. And this is the fail fast. And so what we have in the authorization aspect is now we have to check policies. And now we are going to pass in the require policies dot value, right? But now it's a we have a set, and that's a, so we're going to have set of, let me see, can we, do we have to, yeah, so it's okay, I don't have to do that. Where policies of value, kind of, I think we should take like a set of it. Hopefully you should, I was thinking, anyway, we should leave it as that. And the idea that does is that we can now, in the user service, rather than doing require row here, we can do require policies, and we can do, so we can do system policy, system dot, sorry, what's happening? If I want to pass multiple, does that go? Oh yeah, okay. So it's you pass it with curly bracket. I always forget this thing. I always do forget it. So you can pass it like that: user update, user delete, and you can say, okay, this method requires you to have this particular set of policies, right? And then the required policy is going to pick that up, and you're going to run the check, right? So it takes in the system policy as an array, and then we pass in the authorization aspect, pass that array back to the has policy, and in the auth user we check for has policy properly, and we fail fast, right? And that's basically all of it. And if I try to rerun that, I'm hoping that should continue to run. Yes, that runs. An application is started yet again. So that is at least the version today that we are looking at. And what I'm going to do for the next session is we are going to look at business rules, right? Because now we have just looked at system policy and we've seen how to create them and probably how to structure them based on our requirements. And we're going to look at creating the business rule and basically creating the pattern where we can save something like this from in the database, right? So you need a generic table that will allow you to save something from the database in the form of this kind of a table, and we're going to use this to say, okay, we want to perform, say, a user delete action, for example, the method that we require so if we go to update, so user service right here, which we just looked at. So for this method, we can say, all right, this method requires this, and what we want to do is go to the database, okay, and say, okay, get all the policy rules that have been defined, and these are business rules that have been defined for every action that has user, for the action user delete or user update, right? And these rules, we are going to create policy rules enforcements that are going to utilize these definitions that we did in the database in order to restrict the action that the user can perform. So if the user define that, okay, you want to delete a user, you need to be from a particular department, and the department need to be maybe an administrator or maybe a HR department. What can happen is that somebody from another department might attempt the same thing even though they have a delete user, but they will not be able to, because with just a delete user, you will still need to meet business rules that have been enforced to protect the business against unauthorized access and unauthorized actions. And so even if someone, say, find a way to escalate their privileges to an admin, okay, maybe through a weak point from another department, maybe let's say the marketing department, and someone somehow found a way to have an ad or a user delete or an admin action here, and wants to delete the user, what is going to happen is that the user, it will get to that method, and the aspect oriented method that we're going to create is going to kick in, and it's going to further validate that action based on defined rules that are saved in the database. And we use the database for these rules because these rules can change, right? Today, only the admin can delete users. Tomorrow, they can say, okay, HR now has the option to delete user. What do? You don't want to come to your code, edit it, and redeploy. You just want to come to the database, implement a set of rules, and it automatically picks up, and everything continues, right? What if you say, okay, tomorrow, maybe sales had the option to delete, or sales had the option to add certain figures to the database, right? Pass a particular number, and you want to say, okay, no, sales cannot add a particular amount, cannot add more than a certain amount to a particular database, a particular resource. So what do? You come to your database, you define a set of rules and restrict sales to say, okay, you cannot do this particular action beyond this point. And this is what further restriction and businesses do, because the restriction doesn't just end by saying that, do you have the necessary rules? It ends by saying that it goes further by asking, do you also perform this action within the business description? And do you even have the business authority, the authority based on the business rules to even perform this action despite you having the rule that should grant you access, right? You can have a user delete rule, but are you from the department of admin, right? And so we're going to look at this in the next session in detail, and after which I think that will close out what I wanted to tell you about authorization, authentication, and I think these are some of the most important part of security you need to understand, and it's very important that you kind of understand it. If you have questions, please ask me, and I'm open to answer. And thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.